Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. My name is Trey Grayson. I'm the director of the Institute of Politics. We're excited to have all of you here on this Friday afternoon in a packed house. Today's conversation is going to be moderated by David Gergen, who's the director of the Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership. CPL, along with Harvard's Kennedy School Middle Eastern Initiative, are co-sponsoring this event with the Institute of Politics. So please join me in welcoming David Gergen.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Kennedy School Forum. We're delighted and honored that you're here. On behalf of our guest, who had a request that he and I have joined in, we'd like to begin today by asking everyone to stand for a moment of silence in memory of those Egyptians who have died in the last 3 days. Thank you. And I must tell you that it's a wrenching experience for our guest to be here today. You know, his heart calls for him to be in Egypt, and he had made a commitment to be in the United States, but know how difficult this is for him to be here, and how eager he is to be not to be seen as, quote, the leader of the revolution, but as someone who was a major contributor. I think it's worth understanding that a year ago today, our guest was imprisoned and blindfolded, unsure whether he might die at any moment in Cairo. The Egyptian security forces, and indeed the world, were just awakening to the fact that he had been the anonymous figure behind a Facebook page, which he had started out of Dubai, which had an enormous impact upon young people especially, but people all across Egypt who had been oppressed for so long. And this Facebook page, along with contributions by others, as he's so anxious to point out, was really the spark behind the revolution that started on the 25th of January, a year ago. And it was just 3 days later that he was arrested, and then that he told the security guards and the forces there who he was, and the word started leaking out. And when he was finally released, after spending that time in agony, his wife, his children, uncertain whether they'd ever see him again, when he was finally released, he was greeted as a hero all over the world, as the heroic face of the revolution, as one who had done so much for it. And that revolution, of course, has become of enormous historic significance for the world, holding out the hope to people all over the world who are oppressed that they too can find freedom and democracy. So we're honored, Wael Ghonim, that you're here with us today. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Wael is here in part because he has authored a new book, which I commend to you, the early advanced text, but there is a hardback that's just out called Revolution 2.0. The Power of the People is Greater Than the People in Power, a memoir. And you should know that there's going to be a book signing and a chance to greet him personally at the Charles Hotel. That it will start just around 5:15. We're on a fairly tight schedule here. Wael will leave here just a few minutes after 5 to be over there, but you'll have a chance to come over and get a book. And I'm told that the first 100 people to arrive will actually be entitled to a free book. Everyone thereafter you're on your own. All right, but I've had the pleasure of spending some hours here in the last couple of days reading this book, and I commend it to you. It's a wonderful tale. And I think that for those of us who are interested and concerned about public leadership and how one leads in today's world, it's a really instructive tale. It's something that I think a lot of classes here will be studying in the future about how someone can use the power of the social media. Now, yeah, right, exactly. So let's turn to the star of the show. Um, I'd like you to tell us about your life. Let's first, so people have a sense of context of who you are, where you came from, how you got to be where you are. You tell that tale in long form in the book, but could you tell it to us in short form here now?
First of all, I'm happy to be here. It's very hard to be in the U.S. today while what's going on in Egypt. I feel very torn. I have to say that I'm following the news as they happen in Egypt, but I thought I'm contributing by being among you for what we aspire for the new Egypt. Basically, the reason why I wrote this book is that to answer many of the questions that put me as a leader or as a hero or as the one who sparked the revolution, as probably you have said, because I don't think all of this is right. I'm an ordinary person. I happen to use some tools, which I think in the hands of every one of us, and everyone can actually make use of those tools, and things have developed. I learned through the experience, which is I wanted to share those learnings with everyone, and at the end of the day, tell people that this was no magical, amazing behind the scenes secrets that happened that made Egypt revolt. Egypt revolted because there was a regime that was basically oppressing all the people, not because of a Facebook page or an individual calling for people to go on the street. I was born in Egypt, traveled to Saudi Arabia, lived there for 13 years, and then came back to Cairo. I finished my school, went to studied computer engineering, and then did my MBA at the American University in Cairo, and worked for Google after probably trying 6 times and failing.
That was even shorter than I expected. So let's go back and go through a couple of things. So when you came back from Saudi Arabia as a teenager, and then you went on to Cairo University, you sort of found computer engineering, but you were very interested in technology by that point. You'd already started a website, Islam Wave, by when you were 18 or so.
Yeah, I think as a lot of people like to call me, I'm a geek. So I love computers more than anything else, and I believe in. The first time I logged in the internet, I thought this is the heaven on earth for me, as many would think. And I got addicted to it. The first thing that came to my mind, I want to do something useful and practical. I am a Muslim, so I thought of, I knew a lot of people did not have access to audio, educational audio and video stuff, and the internet was still new. I believe Real Player was still the first big thing. It compresses audio. So I started uploading audios anonymously on a website, which, by the way, I think no one have known that I was until I was released, because that's when the current owners of the website told people while I was in the prison. And I learned a lot from this experience.
From which one? From
The Islamway experience.
Yeah, right.
I learned a lot. I was working anonymously. I was working with different people from around the world. I don't know them. I've never met them. And that helped me a lot develop my skills online. And things kept working. I built a friendship with one of the guys who hired me in his startup company. It was an email company, so I had to do pretty much the same thing without being anonymous. I made agreements with people I've never met. That was the whole experience. The consistent thing in the experience was that I'm always used to the virtual world, and I think it's a nice world. For people like me, sometimes it would be better than the real world.
But now, when you were at Cairo University, I'm a little unclear when you came to the United States, because there's a tale behind that. And you had been communicating with a number of people, including young women, on the internet. Yeah.
I wouldn't agree with what he said. No.
Well, tell us a little bit more about it.
So I wanted to get married. It was very hard to get married in Egypt at a very early age. I was 18. And in the website, I started not to get married. I started already for converts of Islam to communicate together, like a place where a lot of people meet. And I found that lady. I talked with her. we kept chatting, and it turns out, that's not cool. When I traveled to the U.S., the chances, one of my friends happened to know her, and he was recommending her for me, and we just got married. So I found my wife online, and
But you got married within 5 months. I mean, this whole thing happened very quickly,
yeah.
right? Wow, it's unbelievable. But the thing about it was, you never thought you were going to meet this girl when you went to the United
No.
States. You had no idea, just by chance.
Yeah, it was a chance, and that was one of the reasons why it made me keen on making it happen. And thank God, I'm happily married to my wife, and we've been married for 10 years now.
Yeah, and with 2 children.
Yep.
But with a lot of issues along the way about work-life balance, because you were so committed to everything you got.
Used to it though.
But she had converted by then. By the time you
No, she converted before.
she converted before
Yeah.
you met. She met. So you finished up at University of Cairo, but then you went on for the MBA, and your book was quite interesting about how important the MBA was in preparing you for your life on the internet.
That's advertising for Harvard, I think.
No. Actually, we compete with the school across the river. If you'd come here to the Kennedy School, you'd have gotten started even earlier. But but you said that you learned that the marketing was really quite interesting about that.
Yeah, I think the science of marketing was critical in my whole career path, and I learned a lot. And the good thing about the internet is that you can apply and see the feedback instantaneously. It's not like the typical marketing cycle where you have to wait for the ad and see the impact of it. Everything online is monitored and tracked, and so it added a lot of science to the skill I was developing over time. And I always cared about seeing ways to change people's life, and that's something that makes me feel good and keep going. And I never thought at that time when I was studying that I would use the skills I've acquired, which we can talk about on the page, that would make a bit of a difference compared to the typical relationship between the activists or those who are active in the political or human rights area and the audience, which is the mainstream, who is listening to what they are saying and you want them to relate to it.
Yeah, I want to come back to that because it's a really interesting part of your success and why it worked. But let's walk through just a bit more through the biography. So you came out of the University, American University Cairo, the MBA program. You came out, what, 2005 or so?
Yeah.
2005. So it was only 7 years ago. Less than 7 years ago, you graduated.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. So, but then you went had a couple of internet
I feel
jobs.
old now.
You had a couple of internet jobs, and then but you really wanted to work for Google, and you applied once, didn't get it, but you kept applying. Then you got in.
Yeah, I was obsessed with Google because of the fact that I believe internet. I always had this belief that internet can help change the world, and I know this sounds very cliche, or it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but that's just how I see things. And working for Google, for a company that does mass scale projects online in our region would make a difference. And I remember in the interview, the typical why do you want to work for Google? It wasn't absolutely the food. It was really the thing is, what I liked about Google, the democracy of offering people information. Probably people living here do not understand the value of that. We all have equal access to information. In oppressing regimes, most of the people would only get streams of propaganda falling into their brains, and this is how the regime could sustain, beside making everyone scared, making the smart ones afraid and not willing to change, and the rest of the people who might not be fortunate enough to access other sources of information would get into the propaganda machine. So I believe the internet was kind of one of the forces helping in changing this equation.
Right. Is that an advertisement for Google?
Yes. Google doesn't need advertising.
I don't think Facebook does either at this point.
I just remember one of my friends told me once, like, why I would envy you because you work for Google for marketing, and Google doesn't really need any marketing. So what do you do all the day?
So when you started working for Google, you were working actually in Cairo, but then they asked you to relocate into Dubai in January of 2011?
2010.
2010. All right. And at that time, you did not see yourself as an activist, a social activist.
No, the fact is I'm an ordinary person, easily intimidated. I was part of those group of people who are always scared. They don't want to overdo things, like you have your limits. You can crack jokes about Mubarak, but you're not calling for a protest or publicly go against it. And this is one of the reasons why I think credit taking, I took a lot of credit in this revolution, which should not have happened, because at that time, and I remember from 2005 until 2010, there were brave people in the first line, basically going against Mubarak, paying the price of it, while most of us on the mainstream side were watching. We sympathize with them, but we don't think they are doing the right thing, because there is basically no hope, and you are putting yourself in danger. And that was, I think, the mentality of many Egyptians at the time, until things were getting worse, but we weren't seeing light at the end of the tunnel. So Mohammed al-Baradei was someone who decided he might consider running for presidency, and Egyptians created Facebook page saying we want him as a president. About 250,000 Egyptians joined that page at the time, and it became very active. And I noticed a lot of my friends are getting into not politics, but getting into, yes, we will go after this because we're so mad, we're so frustrated. We need any solution. Anything is going to be better than what we are in. And this is how I got addicted to politics.
So as this unfolded, you saw the growing interest, and then the incident of the young man who was killed in Alexandria. Khaled Said, is that the way you pronounce it?
Khaled
Said. Tell us about that, because that really got you deeply engaged.
So the whole process of the change campaign with al-Baradei was kind of very slow, and there was one problem, which was change was personalized. Change was al-Baradei. Change equaled al-Baradei, despite the fact that
he was looked upon as a savior.
Yeah. And that's why I called the second chapter Searching for a Savior. Despite the fact that he said continuously to people that I'm not your savior, Egyptian people have to save themselves, but still, because of the media, it's always the media that creates all these wrong perceptions. Because of the media, it was all around him, and it was easy for the regime to attack. It was easy for the regime to keep, defame him, say he was a traitor. He was the reason for the war in Iraq. And he is someone who works with Israel and having a global agenda to, cut Egypt in pieces and all of this propaganda stuff. And people were kind of buying that. Despite the fact that no one would, if you talk to everyone in the street, are you happy? They will say, no, I don't think this is the right way to go. So when Khaled Said died, I got very emotional. I got really frustrated seeing that this is basically the regime. They commit a lot of crimes and no one is held accountable. And they keep getting more brutal and brutal, and no one is stopping them. So I thought I should use my talent in exposing the human rights violations of the Ministry of Interior Affairs, hoping that by this exposure, they are going to, create like sort of public anger, and by having this done, they would be more cautious. They would change some of their, rules and conditions. Because the worst thing you do to a dictator is to expose him to the largest number of people, of his people. You counter the propaganda that they are doing on everyone. And it was, anonymous. I started the page anonymously because of two things. One is that I want to see my kids. I want to keep going, and definitely for my personal security. And the other is because change cause should not be personalized. And people easily connect with causes that are not personalized because, first of all, they don't question the intentions. I might be doing this to take credit and to put myself in a position that using their efforts. And the second, because once the idea is the leader, everyone subscribe to and own. And this is pretty much what we have seen in Jan 25th. That was the biggest thing I personally noticed from the 14th to 25th. Everyone was owning it as if they are the ones who called for it. And if Wael Ghonim or Muhammad al-Baradei or whomever asked everyone on 14th of January, let's go on 25th on the street, probably it wouldn't have succeeded. And the first day, 36,000 people joined.
It's on your Facebook page.
On the Facebook page, yeah. And the third day, I've reached by then 100,000, and I started thinking, I need someone to help, and I got one of the guys who was helping me on the Baradei page. I told him, do you want to be an admin on this page? Sure. And that guy I never met in my life until after the revolution, and we became, we became two admins. His name is Abdurrahman, so we became two admins managing the page until the revolution time. Through the experience of going through the experience of this page, I've learned a lot of things, and I've applied a lot of what I've studied at school or what I've learned from previous experiences. And the most important one is that engageism is more important than activism. So
engagement is more important than
activism. I call it engageism.
Engageism, okay.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, a lot of people want to have some beliefs and start, isolating themselves from the mainstream, which should not happen. What you should do is try and get the mainstream to adopt the beliefs. So the first thing is, it didn't feel like the page was run by the admins. Most of the time, activities or projects, ideas come from the members, and we do surveys continuously. We do continuous surveys to ask people what do they want to do. It was not non-confrontational. I always spoke with I never spoke with we. Never used the language like the regime. I always said the government. And all of that have helped with the people making the connection with the page. It was just one of us talking our language and feeling the same feelings we have. And people were very empowered whenever we make the decisions on should we go do the silent stand or not, and then people participate in the surveys, and based on the result of the survey, we decide on going or not, and so on. And it kept going for months.
So so one of the first lessons out of this, because there were other pages that had been developed, or at least one other page that was in memory of this young man who was killed in Alexandria, but they were much more confrontational, and you decided you did not want to be confrontational. You wanted you invite people in effect.
Yeah, there was a page that was created few days, I think 2 days before I created the page, or one day, and that page was very famous. It had much more audience. It's called Ana Ismi Khalid Saeed. My name is Khalid Saeed, and the profile page was like, we're not gonna leave you dogs of the regime. So we're gonna go after you dogs of the regime. And they were very confrontational. They had about 60,000 more members than Kulna Khalid Saeed, and they kept going in their very confrontational tone. And I remember one time we were doing these silent stands, which is an idea by one of the members of the page who said, let's go to the street, face the beach, our back to the street, wearing black, and not doing anything for 1 hour, which was, to many people, that was very silly. What a silly, stupid thing. The regime does not care about people protesting in front of the Ministry of Interior Affairs, chanting down, down Hosni Mubarak. Will they care about those who would do this non-confrontational approach? And to me and to the non-confrontational people like me, that was one of our ways to express our anger. And the fact is, the regime doesn't like this, because that can attract more mainstream people into the cause, which is the very dangerous thing. I believe that dictators want their opponents to seem like extremists. They want to isolate them from being able to reach out to the masses. Right. So back again, I talked to the guy, one of the admins, anonymously, and I told him, can you give me the statistics of your page? So he voluntarily gave me the statistics, and it turns out the people participate in Kullina Khalid Saeed almost double the participations they have in their page, despite the fact that they had 60,000 more members. So I asked him, I wonder why. Do you think why? And we started a conversation where basically I told him that your approach is the reason. People don't feel connected with what you are saying. People don't like what you are saying. You are very aggressive, you are very confrontational, and people want the tone to be as, as they wanted it to be, no, as you wanted it to be.
So, yeah, and you say in your book that Gandhi had been an important influence for you in thinking about this approach.
Yeah, of course. I admire Gandhi for his approach and his philosophy, and I believe that the more I read about him, the more I learn from what he have done, the more I think he was ultimately right. And probably that's not the right approach for many people. People would argue, no, that's not going to work. And I had these arguments with some of the revolutionaries who are more, aggressive and on the line than me. I just don't relate to what they do, and I relate more to Gandhi. And we even were cutting parts of the movie and putting the Gandhi movie and subtitling it and uploading it on the page to tell people. I remember one time people were very angry because of the police reaction, and I got this scene when he was in South Africa, in the movie when he was in South Africa, telling people, they can kill my body, they can torture my body, they can kill me, but one thing they're not gonna get out of me, which is my obedience and respect for myself. I don't know if he said exactly that, but that was the main message we wanted to give. We're gonna get all of our rights by being nonviolent, by actually not responding to their violence, by showing them that they are ugly because of what they are doing, and we are, civilized.
So, as you know, Martin Luther King famously was a student of Gandhi, made a big difference in the civil rights movement in this country. But your approach to the Facebook page itself was interesting. You said in terms of marketing and this engagism, as you call it, which I found such an interesting
I'm joking
word.
about it.
No, I like it. I like it. Bob Putnam, who's here on this faculty, would love that. We talk about civic engagement. He studies that. He'll be very interested. But that you had like a 4 steps that you wanted people who came to the Facebook page to go through. Talk about that just a bit.
So it was like a sales tunnel to me. At the end of the day, you are convincing people of adopting a cause and being active in it. That's the whole thing. That's what we are trying to do. So it starts with people liking the page, and then becoming active and liking and commenting to the content, and then getting active in online campaigns, and finally going to the street in non-confrontational forms. So, for example, the online campaigns, the very first one I launched was meant to be to brand the page. So we asked people to hold up to take photos of themselves holding up signs of, let's say, Kullina Khalid Saeed. And the reason why it was very important to tell the audience of the page, those are not zombies or creatures not from this world. They are Egyptians. My name is Ahmad, I'm 25 years old, and I will tell you Kullina Khalid Saeed. So people started to make the connection that this page has people like me. I am just like one of them. And taking to the streets was not really planned as anything until this guy came up with the idea of the silent stance, which was pretty non-confrontational. I have to also say that now I'm analyzing what I have done, but in fact, everything that was happening spontaneously and reactively, and without master planning. So it's very easy now to analyze and say this is the case, this is the sales tunnel, but that wasn't in my mind while doing what I was doing. I cannot claim something that wasn't there.
What about your own personal conversion into becoming an activist? You write in the book that when you saw the response to the Facebook page starting to grow, that you had this nice phrase about it brought feelings for you, the stirrings of a rare opportunity to make a difference. That's how you expressed your own sense of making this commitment and really making this the center of your life.
Yeah, the thing it gets into your life without meaning to do it. One reason is because the fact the internet is very, and the feedback is very instant and very spontaneous. You write something, you see the feedback instantly, and actually that was one of the reasons why a lot of people were contributing, they right away see the credit for the good things they have done. Once they upload a photo of themselves doing this, they see hundreds of likes. Others look at them and say, I want to do the same. So even the revolution, even my readiness to sacrifice anything for my country, just came as in the events, as in the actions, as what was everything that was happening around us made it just happen, and I think a lot of Egyptians after the 14th, before the 14th, they would never have thought they are ready to go to the street and die for a cause, and right after the 14th, everything completely changed and shifted.
Let me ask you one last question, then we're going to ask those of you who would like to participate. There are microphones here, there are two here, there's one there and one there, and we'll go to your question. So if you want to ask a question, if you can start lining up now, that'd be terrific. And then I'm going to go ahead. I wanted to ask you another question now. It was interesting. We have a member of the faculty here named Marshall Gans, who is a social organizer and dates all the way back to the Cesar Chavez in this country, and Obama asked him to help organize some of his campaign. And Marshall raises the question raised with me yesterday, whether the internet, well, if you look at what's happened since the revolution and the elections, the people on the street, many of the people who came out to demonstrate are still disappointed, and there's some concern, at least we read in our press, that the Islamic Brotherhood has done far better in the election process than the people on the streets have done, in effect. And Marshall Gans's question is the internet very good at mobilizing people, but not so good at organizing people, so that you have a sort of formal party-type structures? And I'm curious what you think about that. There's a big argument in this country about the place of the internet in social change.
I think the internet is good at doing both. The fact why it was only a few months before the election took place, and a lot of us as activists were busy with many other things other than just the elections, because there were a lot of issues happening in the country. And none have effectively used, I haven't seen anyone effectively using the internet to organize the activities. You can definitely manage campaigns online and make something happen out of it. Yet there's one thing, I'm personally not disappointed, and I want to make this point clear. I'm not disappointed from the election results, and I think I'm talking about myself, not on behalf of everyone else. I took to the streets because I think that the Egyptians have been denied the right to choose whom they want governing them for over 60 years. I did not take to the streets to say that X or Y or Z is the right guy and he's the one who's going to make a difference for Egypt in the next 5 years. I believe that Egypt is far better not without having a leader in the revolution who might have taken over and started, doing his version of democracy once again. It's better to have the people choose whom they want, and then in few years, if they don't perform well, if they don't solve the problems where most of the people were in the street, mainly economically. I probably don't have an economic problem, but most of the people who were in the streets does have a lot of economic problems. If those were not solved, they are going to be out of it. As far as there is democracy, as far as we know exactly that our job is to make sure that Egypt becomes democratic, electing a president, and then making sure that the democratic process is continuous and no one is hijacking it or inside it and not gonna let anyone join. I think I'm personally fine, and I believe this is one of the most important goals of the revolution. If Muslim Brotherhood wins, if any other wins, I'm fine as far as that's the Egyptian people's choice.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. Why don't we go to the floor? And the tradition here, as I think most of you know, is this is a chance for questions. There's one question per customer. And if you would, please remember.
1.99.
Yeah. And please remember that each question ends with a question mark. Please, if you please identify yourself first.
Hi, I'm Anand Gerdadas. It's an honor to share a room with you after seeing you from afar. A question, slightly provincial question about the role of America in all this. It's interesting at one level that you work for one American company. You built your page on a platform of another American company. So there seems to be a very continued relevance for what this country does. At another level, you and many others have criticized the US propping up the old regime for as long as it did and not supporting the democratic aspirations that you've talked about. And now in this country, there's so much worry about decline. Who are we? Do we still have a role in your part of the world and others? What do you think is the special relevance, if at all, of the United States today?
Wonderfully expressed question.
I saw you on Twitter, by the way. So one thing I want to say is, by the way, one of the reasons why I wrote the book is I'm exposed to a certain side of the story. There's no leader in this revolution, so the wisdom and the knowledge about what exactly happened, what led to it, could be argued by many people. So the fact is, everyone should get all what he knows and put it, move it from behind the scenes to in front of everyone, and then we have analysts who look at different things. If you ask me, I think what made this revolution succeed was the Egyptian people. It was nothing to do with the U.S. And at the end of the day, the U.S. is a country that wants to serve its own interests. We have a historical, multiple historical transactions where we have seen that even if those interests are against the values of the American people or the universal values that we are as human beings have agreed to. So there is nothing for me as someone who use logic to believe that the U.S. have pushed the revolution or have supported the revolution. I think the U.S. have taken sides after the fact that it was clearly going to happen. And I remember Hillary Clinton saying that on 27th, saying that the government is stable, our friends and the great Hosni Mubarak. So that was the first part. I don't think the U.S. had anything to do. The U.S. just took sides at the end of the day, and it was betting on the winning horse. Sorry. Also, I think there has been a lot of credit given to me and given to the page. I want to say the same thing again. The revolution would have happened anyway. This is a fact of life. People were not happy, and 1,000 protests happened in 2010, and strikes among different workers. People were just missing the trigger, and the trigger was Tunisia. It didn't have anything to do with Egypt or sorry, it didn't have anything to do with the US or Facebook. The trigger was really Tunisia. Looking at how technology have helped, I think this is pretty much away from I wouldn't give the US the credit for having Facebook. At the end of the day, people use tools. So I know I sound very bad trying to get the US out of the picture, because I saw on the other side a lot of credit-taking process happening in some of the Western newspapers about the role that the US have played in the revolution. What do I want the US to do to support the country? This is very personal. I want them to do nothing. I want them to stay neutral, because at the end of the day, if the interests of the Egyptian people does go against their personal or the country interests, which I highly respect, that's normal, they are gonna basically take the side of the American people. Egyptians are capable of going through this, learning from everyone else and getting help as much as they can when it comes to the economy and so on, but we are very sensitive to interference. In fact, every time the US foreign policy have interfered in Egypt, it's always taken in the opposite way. People don't like that. People do not appreciate the fact that the US is telling us what to be done. Yet there are lots of areas where there should be help, and I believe economy is definitely one of them. And making sure that the Egypt is going to be still an ally of the US in a new form, a form that would have mutual respect rather than orders coming via phone lines. So I assume the rest is angry. Sorry.
Charles Cogan, Belfer Center. Can you decipher for us this terrible football tragedy at Port Said? As I understand it, the Cairo team, Al Ahly, has a group of supporters, they call them the Ultras, and they're the most violent of the demonstrators. And how did this happen? Was it spontaneous? Because most of the casualties are among these fans of the Al Ahly team. I think it's 67 out of 79 or something. Was this a spontaneous event? Did the police stand back? Did the Port Said team sort of have orders to attack these the Cairo team? Can you give us some of your insights on this?
So does everyone know what happened? Okay. So basically, I think that I don't like judging intentions or getting into conspiracies, but what I can see clearly is that the police have done a very bad job, whether intentionally or unintentionally, a very bad job that resulted in, for the first time, by the way, this number of people die in a soccer match in Egypt. And there has been a lot of rumors where people are saying they are paying the price of being against SCAF. The Ultras, before Jan 25th, they never get involved in politics, and state security was always on them because they are very organized. They can do a lot of protests or moves and so on. I think that what happened was horrible, and whether it's intentional or unintentional, it's a crime. And the problem is in Egypt since 25th of January, all these incidents happen. No one is held. At the end of the day, they establish all these fact-finding committees. At the end of the day, no one from the authorities pay the political price, because this is a political crime at the end of the day. Someone has to be politically accountable for the death of all those people. And this is what frustrates people and create another wave of protests that we have seen in the past couple of days. People do not want to protest or die for nothing. I have one of my friends yesterday lost his left eye. He was shot in his face. So, and he's been hospitalized now. So I think that the situation is very critical. To me, what is critical, or what is the most important thing now, is to think how can we get out of this, not how this happened or why it happened. And the path is according to as many people want to do, end the military rule as soon as possible through elections, to get a president that most of the Egyptians said yes to, so we end all this vicious circle of violence that is happening right now.
What would you do if you were there now?
I would have been protesting to the movement which I belong to. We have created a political lobbying group. We are calling the parliament to speed up the process of elections. The elections should start as soon as February, and we have a president by April, because the current roadmap suggests that Egypt will have a president by end of June.
Please.
Hi, I'm Harleen. I'm an undergraduate at the college. I was wondering if you could talk about what challenges Egypt is going to be facing in the next few years as it transitions, and then specifically what role you think that technology can play, and if it can kind of sustain the mass mobilization and the buildup of civil society that we've seen, or if it even should.
Okay. So the biggest challenge, as far as I see, is economy. Egypt, almost 1 out of every 2 people lives under $2 a day. And a lot of people were saying that we're heading towards a poverty revolution, where the poor people are going to go, in masses in the streets and start calling for, real change. And that would have been a completely different style than what we have seen in Jan 25th. Economy is a big problem. It will require all the Egyptians to unite and work together. And this is why when we created our political movement, we had people from different groups and ideologies all together, because we believe that Egypt is not going to go forward with Egypt versus Egypt mentality. Like, I am an Islamist, you are a secular guy. We have to keep arguing about the ideologies while someone is laying down on the floor for 3 months because he cannot afford going to the hospital to get his broken leg fixed. So economy is very critical, and going through the transition of democracy has been obviously a pain in the past 1 year. It's not easy. This country is recovering from 60 years of rule, and it will be very hard. We'll see a lot of challenges in the next few years. I think technology can play a role in spreading the awareness and getting more people empowered. The movement we've created has now we're building a system where we can organize our work together and make sure that everyone is quite well informed. The activities happen, we announce them online and we take them offline and so on. As well as definitely in education, there's a huge space that technology can play. But again, that is all restricted to seeing Egypt recover from the military rule, which will not happen before they go, leave the politics and go back to their main job, which is protecting the country.
Jed Schwartz from Somerville. I was wondering if you see also a grave danger that the revolution will be betrayed by the military, that you'll be unable to overcome the rationale for the military rule. And I'm sort of, I'm encouraged by your progress so far, but wondering whether it would be good for some of you to begin to study political philosophy, because which seems kind of like a non sequitur, and I apologize, but you remember that
I agree. So
no, you agree, good, because I mean, like John Locke, there's Voltaire and David Hume and these guys who critiqued the power of the theocracy, essentially. And it seems to me that if you could build on those kinds of ideas, that you might be able to overcome the drag of fundamentalist, beliefs, which I believe are retarding the economic and social development. And if you could give me your email, I would be very appreciative. Maybe now
Sure.
or later.
Now it's going to be very hard.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of discussions about the future of Egypt and being very very worried about the Islamists ruling the country. I mean, I have my opinion. I could be wrong. I could be naive, as you've mentioned. I don't have a problem admitting that. I think that if we look at the history of Egypt in the past, probably couple of hundred of years, Egypt was colonized by the French people, and hardly any Egyptian speaks French. While, if you look at other nations that were colonized by the French people, probably they speak more French than they speak Arabic. And, the British people colonized Egypt, and also most of our people speak broken English, as you can tell. And the Shia, one religious example, the Shia came to Egypt to build the largest institute that spreads the Shia belief across the Arab world, and it ended up with the largest Sunni organization. I pretty much don't believe in the fact that you can enforce change on people, and if that happens in Egypt, where the society is very moderate and mainstream, that will go completely the opposite way. That's one thing. And the second, I know about the media fuss going on, but I have been in meetings, and I think private meetings with the different parties, the ones who are in control now of the parliament, they have the majority. I think there has been a lot of misconceptions, and they are dragged into discussions, and we need to sort of put aside the preconceived beliefs about them and put them on the real stage. We want you to perform more, to solve the economy problem. This is what the taxi driver in Egypt who voted for the Muslim Brotherhood wants. He wants them to fix the problems of the country, not to tell them how to not to tell him how to worship God.
Good, please. We're going to have time for, I think, a couple more. We'll see where we are.
Hello, my name is Vasu Sankara. I'm with the economics department here. And I was thinking about specifically Egypt's youth and sort of the transition that people have made in being more interested in politics. I was hearing about your own personal story with Al Baradei and the Facebook page. And then personally today, one of my acquaintances in Egypt, and he was active in a protest, and there was a comment of be safe. And I was just thinking, if you see this as kind of a next stage in Egypt's progress, and simultaneously, I know that the youth are one cross-section of a broad societal movement, but do you think there is a certain path in terms of what would be maybe most constructive, such as the youth being lobbying, as you were saying, to oversee the democratic process, or the youth actually participating and running for office in existing political parties, or none of these options? And if there is one specific thing that comes to mind, what do you think is the biggest challenges for making that actually be realized? Thanks.
I think that's one of our biggest challenges at the moment, and how to institutionalize those who take to the streets, those brave people who are ready to die, facing tanks and sacrificing their lives. How can we move that from this to political participation? And we haven't done good effort so far in it. And unfortunately, most of the parties have put senior people, mostly senior people, as candidates. So only very few young guys have managed to run for parliament and actually won. There is a 27 years old guy, for example, in the parliament he's the youngest guy ever in the history of the Egyptian parliament, and there is a 30 years old guy, and so on. What I'm personally hoping to do and to see is to get people more involved in the lobbying groups, and eventually also getting people running for offices. There's we have local community elections taking place in a few months, and basically this is for the people who serve the small districts. And this is more of a job that the young people should get in. Whether they will be able to win or not, we have to do some pressure on the parties to make sure that they support the youngsters. Because they are the future of the country, and they are the ones who basically showed that they are not happy and they can flip things around, and everyone then joined them.
Please.
Thank you, Wael. Shahem Al-Warra, a graduate of the college. I know you're an optimist about Egypt's future, but we all know that Egypt plays a pivotal role in the politics of the Arab world, and other countries are looking towards Egypt to see what will happen in Egypt, especially opposition movements in other countries. The tragic events unfolding over the last few months have given pause to a lot of these groups, and now people say, well, maybe there's a fallacy that things can never get any worse. There's a dictator, but we're putting food on the table. It's generally safe if you're not involved in politics. So this idea that things can't get any worse, well, maybe they can. So in which case, maybe we should just say it's okay, settle for the status quo. And you're seeing that with large segments in countries that are being ruled by probably even more brutal dictators. I'm curious about your views on kind of the role Egypt has, which it has historically had towards Arab countries in terms of leading.
So I'm not an optimist by choice. By the way, I want to see the good side of the story, and I know there is a very bad side of it. And I read and I see how can you look at this negative side. I just believe that being frustrated is not going to bring us forward. Being frustrated is not going to be good for the people. People want to see hope, and they don't want to see frustration. That's why I'm an optimist. Do I see the challenges that Egypt is going through? I definitely see them, and I think it's not easy at all. And sometimes I get frustrated and sit down and really worry about the country and its future. But I try to keep myself on the optimistic side. Egypt is definitely a role model for a lot of the Arab world countries. I think if anyone think that the next few years are going to be amazing and great and everything is going to go in the right direction, probably they are short-sighted, because after all, when you have cancer and you take you go through chemotherapy, a lot of bad things happen to you, but eventually you get there and you get better. And by the way, that was one of the problems of the revolution, was the very high expectations that were given to the people. If Mubarak is out, all the problems will be solved. In fact, part of our political naivety, I don't see him, is that we genuinely start to think that. And I'm not a political expert. I have thought that we would get in a better situation. But now, as we're learning, we know it's much more complicated. So for those young guys, I would say, yes, you are in a bad situation. It could get worse when you revolt, yet eventually the future will be much better, because a generation after yours is going to enjoy real democracy, and those who are ruling you are going to be accountable for everything they are doing.
Last question.
And by the way, one funny thing, I was praying right after the 14th of January that nothing bad happens in Tunisia. because if something bad happens in Tunisia, I remember the newspapers were basically distributing all the stories about, people robbed a bank in Tunisia. A bunch of people got killed in Tunisia because the regime wanted to tell people it will get worse if we do like them.
That's very interesting. Last question.
Hi, I'm Micha Sifri. I'm teaching here at the Shorenstein Center, course on politics of the internet, and I run the Personal Democracy Forum. Wael, you're an Egyptian, I'm an American, but we are both netizens of the undemocratic Republic of Facebook. In your case, you both used Facebook in some amazing ways, but at a critical moment, your Facebook page was shut down arbitrarily. It was a crisis. And luckily for you, you were able to scramble with some help of others to get it turned back on. But my question in general is, should activists trust Facebook? And what should we netizens ask of companies like Facebook to make them safer places to use for the kind of work that people like you do?
Yeah, so my Facebook, the page was shut because I was managing it from an anonymous account, a fake account, and Facebook has a policy that basically you cannot use Facebook with fake identities. So when people reported the page right before the Egyptian parliament elections, there was a huge number of government activists reporting the page. Facebook looked and was like, okay, that administrator is fake. This looks like a bad page. Close, and they closed it. And as you mentioned, we got it back through connections. I think that
Some of your people had to put their names on it, right?
yeah, there is an Egyptian American lady. Her name is Nadine Wahab. She offered help, and she said, listen, I can put my name on the page. I don't mind. So it was the ownership of the page was transferred to her, and the page got recovered. There has been interesting debates about the fake identities and the real identities, or the decisions that Facebook takes to they think it's the right one. I believe that as, what did you say, netizens, we should. There are two things. You can always pressure these companies. At the end of the day, it's a company. You have no control over it. You haven't. You should not basically elect its president who runs it. Only the shareholders have the right to say. You either do pressure on them for the change you are seeking, or abide to the regulations and deal with what you have. I don't personally trust any tool. I trust the people behind the tool. If Facebook all of a sudden decides no politics in Facebook, we're going to shut down everything, of course it's not going to happen, but if that happens, we will find another tool. I was using a survey tool throughout the whole page experience, which had hundreds of thousands of votes, and I discovered on the night of 10th of February that it was a small company run by two people from their apartment in the US. So people will always find the tools that will make them work in the way they want, and companies like Facebook, as they become big, it becomes very, it's a huge responsibility on them and their actions. Our job is to just make our voice loud and clear for whatever we don't agree with.
There are an awful lot of people here, I'm sure, just about this. You've packed an awful lot into 32 years. You're very young. Where do you go from here?
To the book. So I have to say, I'm happy. On the 8th of February, when I was released, when I saw all the events taking place, I wrote that we will win because we don't understand politics, because we are naive. We will win because we are dreaming, and to many people, the dreams were impossible. But those people, to us, this dream will happen, or we will sacrifice our life for it. What exactly will I do? I don't know, and I don't think I should know because things have been changing completely. I'm very spontaneous. I'm very reactive. A lot of the stuff that happened on the page, happens because it just, someone writes a comment and I react to it. I know for many established people, this is something very, very bad, and we'll talk forever about, the importance of strategizing and, thinking about looking at, putting a long-term plan and having a vision. I've learned all that in the school. But I, for me, I'm gonna do my best. I love my country. I'm so.
Are you living in Cairo now?
Yeah, most of the time. I love my country. I'll do most of what I can do for its people. The moment I see, most of the Egyptians proud and we systematically solve the problem of poverty in this country, then probably I'll come at Harvard, do an MBA, and learn the real.
Well, you will always be welcome at the Kennedy School. We would love to have you come back. I do want to say we got this note that actually it's 150. I had not appreciated that two co-sponsors, the Institute of Politics and the Center for Public Leadership, have jointly purchased 150 books. And they will be there for the first 150 people who come to the Charles Hotel.
I also want to say that all the proceeds of this book is going to, I'm not getting anything of it. I think it's unfair that people died and I become a millionaire out of the book. So all of the proceeds are going to Egypt, to NGOs and the families of martyrs and injured people.
Wael Ghonim, I think you can tell from the response of this audience tonight, we appreciate your humility. Thanks. But we also very, very much appreciate what you've done and how you've championed and become a champion of freedom and democracy in the world. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. My name is Trey Grayson. I'm the director of the Institute of Politics. We're excited to have all of you here on this Friday afternoon in a packed house. Today's conversation is going to be moderated by David Gergen, who's the director of the Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership. CPL, along with Harvard's Kennedy School Middle Eastern Initiative, are co-sponsoring this event with the Institute of Politics. So please join me in welcoming David Gergen.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Kennedy School Forum. We're delighted and honored that you're here. On behalf of our guest, who had a request that he and I have joined in, we'd like to begin today by asking everyone to stand for a moment of silence in memory of those Egyptians who have died in the last 3 days. Thank you. And I must tell you that it's a wrenching experience for our guest to be here today. You know, his heart calls for him to be in Egypt, and he had made a commitment to be in the United States, but know how difficult this is for him to be here, and how eager he is to be not to be seen as, quote, the leader of the revolution, but as someone who was a major contributor. I think it's worth understanding that a year ago today, our guest was imprisoned and blindfolded, unsure whether he might die at any moment in Cairo. The Egyptian security forces, and indeed the world, were just awakening to the fact that he had been the anonymous figure behind a Facebook page, which he had started out of Dubai, which had an enormous impact upon young people especially, but people all across Egypt who had been oppressed for so long. And this Facebook page, along with contributions by others, as he's so anxious to point out, was really the spark behind a revolution that started on the 25th of January, a year ago. And it was just 3 days later that he was arrested, and then that he told the security guards and the forces there who he was, and the word started leaking out. And when he was finally released, after spending that time in agony, his wife, his children, uncertain whether they'd ever see him again, when he was finally released, he was greeted as a hero all over the world, as the heroic face of the revolution, as one who had done so much for it. And that revolution, of course, has become of enormous historic significance for the world, holding out the hope to people all over the world who are oppressed that they too can find freedom and democracy. So we're honored, Wael Ghonim, that you're here with us today. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Wael is here in part because he has authored a new book, which I commend to you, the early advanced text, but there is a hardback that's just out called Revolution 2.0. The Power of the People is Greater Than the People in Power, a memoir. And you should know that there's going to be a book signing and a chance to greet him personally at the Charles Hotel. That it will start just around 5:15. We're on a fairly tight schedule here. Wael will leave here just a few minutes after 5 to be over there. But you'll have a chance to come over and get a book. And I'm told that the first 100 people to arrive will actually be entitled to a free book. Everyone thereafter you're on your own. All right. But I've had the pleasure of spending some hours here in the last couple of days reading this book, and I commend it to you. It's a wonderful tale. And I think that for those of us who are interested and concerned about public leadership and how one leads in today's world, it's a really instructive tale. It's something that I think a lot of classes here will be studying in the future about how someone can use the power of the social media. Now, yeah, right, exactly. So let's turn to the star of the show. I'd like you to tell us about your life. Let's first, so people have a sense of context. Of who you are, where you came from, how you got to be where you are. You tell that tale in long form in the book, but could you tell it to us in short form here now?
First of all, I'm happy to be here. It's very hard to be in the U.S. today while what's going on in Egypt. I feel very torn. I have to say that I'm following the news as they happen in Egypt, but I thought I'm contributing by being among you for what we aspire for the new Egypt. Basically, the reason why I wrote this book is that to answer many of the questions that put me as a leader or as a hero or as the one who sparked the revolution, as probably you have said, because I don't think all of this is right. I'm an ordinary person. I happen to use some tools, which I think in the hands of every one of us, and everyone can actually make use of those tools, and things have developed. I learned through the experience, which is I wanted to share those learnings with everyone, and at the end of the day, tell people that this was no magical, amazing behind-the-scenes secrets that happened that made Egypt revolt. Egypt revolted because there was a regime that was basically oppressing all the people, not because of a Facebook page or an individual calling for people to go on the street. I was born in Egypt, traveled to Saudi Arabia, lived there for 13 years, and then came back to Cairo. I finished my school, went to studied computer engineering, and then did my MBA at the American University in Cairo. And worked for Google after probably trying 6 times and failing.
That was even shorter than I expected. So let's go back and go through a couple of things. So when you came back from Saudi Arabia as a teenager, and then you went on to Cairo University, you sort of found computer engineering, but you were very interested in technology by that point. You'd already started a website, Islam Wave, by when you were 18 or so.
Yeah, I think as a lot of people like to call me, I'm a geek. So I love computers more than anything else. And I believe in, the first time I logged in the internet, I thought this is the heaven on earth for me, as many would think. And I got addicted to it. The first thing that came to my mind, I want to do something useful and practical. I am a Muslim, so I thought of, I knew a lot of people did not have access to audio, educational audio and video stuff, and the internet was still new. I believe Real Player was still the first big thing. It compresses audio. So I started uploading audios anonymously on a website, which, by the way, I think no one have known that I was until I was released, because that's when the current owners of the website told people while I was in the prison. And I learned a lot from this experience.
From which one? From
The
what?
Islamway experience.
Yeah, right.
I learned a lot. I was working anonymously. I was working with different people from around the world. I don't know them. I've never met them. And that helped me a lot develop my skills online. And things kept working. I built a friendship with one of the guys who hired me in his startup company. It was an email company, so I had to do pretty much the same thing without being anonymous. I made agreements with people I've never met. That was the whole experience. The consistent thing in the experience was that I'm always used to the virtual world, and I think it's a nice world. For people like me, sometimes it would be better than the real world.
But now, when you were at Cairo University, I'm a little unclear when you came to the United States, because there's a tale behind that. And you had been communicating with a number of people, including young women, on the internet. Yeah.
I wouldn't agree with what he said. No.
Well, tell us a little bit more about it.
So I wanted to get married. It was very hard to get married in Egypt at a very early age. I was 18. And in the website, I started not to get married. I started already for converts of Islam to communicate together, like a place where a lot of people meet. And I found that lady. I talked with her. We kept chatting, and it turns out, that's not cool. When I traveled to the U.S., the chances, one of my friends happened to know her, and he was recommending her for me, and we just got married. So I found my wife online, and
But you got married within 5 months. I mean, this whole thing happened very quickly, right?
yeah.
Wow, it's unbelievable. But the thing about it was, you never thought you were going to meet this girl when you went to the United
No.
States. You had no idea, just total by chance.
Yeah, it was a chance, and that was one of the reasons why it made me keen on making it happen. And thank God, I'm happily married to my wife, and we've been married for 10 years now.
Yeah, and with 2 children.
Yep.
But with a lot of issues along the way about work-life balance, because you were so committed to everything you got.
Used to it though.
But she had converted by then. By the time you
No, she converted before.
she converted before
Yeah.
you met. She met. So you finished up at University of Cairo, but then you went on for the MBA, and your book was quite interesting about how important the MBA was in preparing you for your life on the internet.
That's advertising for Harvard, I think.
No. Actually, we compete with the school across the river. If you'd come here to the Kennedy School, you'd have gotten started even earlier. But but you said that you learned that the marketing was really quite interesting about that.
Yeah, I think the science of marketing was critical in my whole career path, and I learned a lot. And the good thing about the internet is that you can apply and see the feedback instantaneously. It's not like the typical marketing cycle where you have